don't take no trips on LSD. And we don't burn no draft cards down on Main Street. We like living right and being free. We don't make no party out of loving. We like holding hands and pitching woo, woo. And we don't let our hair go long and shaggy like the hippies at San Francisco. I'm proud to be an Okie from Missouri. They swear even swear ball. Still wave old glory down at the courthouse. White lightning still the biggest thrill of all. Legion Roman sandals won't be seen. Football's still the roughest game on campus, and the kids there still respect old Jimmy Dean. I'm proud to be an Okie from Missouri. Still wave old glory down at the courthouse. White lightning still the biggest thrill of all. We still wave old glory down at the courthouse. In Muskogee, Oklahoma, USA.
Injured in a car accident, neighbors in this town of 3,600 people organized a volleyball tournament to help pay for their medical expenses. Here, people rely on each other instead of government, says Pastor Ron Marsh.
I think people do look more to the community in small towns. There's still a real understanding among people that if you have an immediate need, an emergency kind of need, you can go to the church. You probably have some family here, and you can find that kind of emergency support here.
Virtually all white, overwhelmingly Christian, and mainly Republican, El Dorado is typical of small-town USA. It's 2 hours south and a world away from Kansas City, where a racially diverse population routinely elects Democrats. There have always been differences between rural and urban America, but the divisions have grown deeper over time. In 1972, just over half of rural Americans were represented by a Democrat in the House. By 2013, 77% were represented by a Republican. That divide has deepened in part because small-town residents are having vastly different life experiences from their big city counterparts. The nicest restaurant in El Dorado Springs doesn't serve alcohol, even though owner Todd Leonard suspects it would help his shaky bottom line.
As a decision for me, I have to look at in my community with what I do in my church, in our beliefs, is I have to stay away from a product that could cause damage to my name.
Not surprising in a town that supports more than 30 churches and just one bar.
Our church here, we have pretty close fellowship. A lot of the people here have been here most of their lives. They have a very deep belief in God, a belief in the Bible. They want to share that with other people who have similar beliefs and similar values.
At one time, Democrats won many of these voters, but as cultural issues have become more important in politics, that has changed. Vicki Hartzler, who represents the 4th Congressional District, was part of the wave of Tea Party-backed Republicans who were elected in 2010.
There's a disconnect between real life and some of the policies coming out of Washington, D.C., and that lack of common sense is very frustrating for people in rural America.
A diverse population tends to produce more liberal politics. Hartzler says that here, the lack of diversity is a strength.
It makes it pretty easy to come up with solutions because there's unity among the people of what the solution should be.
Compare that to how Emmanuel Cleaver talks about his 5th congressional district right next door, which includes Kansas City.
The people in Kansas City value the racial diversity. They celebrate the racial diversity, and it's not new. It goes back clearly into the 1930s and 40s. There are parts of Kansas City that we refer to as the United Nations. I'm not suggesting that we don't have clashes between cultures. I am saying that for the most part, the people move here with great intentionality.
El Dorado is located where the Ozark Mountains meet the Western Plains. It's a place where the principal of the only high school in town herds cattle as a hobby.
I just got a small little ranch outside of town, and it's kind of my stress relief from work, and I enjoy working with cows and working with horses, and anyhow, just mess around on the farm.
But, he says, as a career for his students, agricultural opportunities are not what they used to be.
We still have a farming community, still kids come back and do that, but unfortunately farms now have been taken out of the homestead too, and have become big farms, like 2,000 or 3,000 acre farms, and those are bought by industries and those type of things.
Creating new opportunities for young people here hasn't been easy. Kimball Long, longtime publisher of the local newspaper, formed a nonprofit group that won a $400,000 federal grant to install new sidewalks and lighting in hopes of reviving the downtown area. But the effort hasn't drawn new businesses.
In the last few years, we've had some fires that burned down 2 buildings right across the street from me. We've had some untimely deaths of business owners. And to start a business right now is probably a pretty scary proposition for people.
With few jobs waiting for young people after college, it's taken as a given here that most will never come back. High school junior Ben Vickers wants to pursue a career in music.
After college, it kind of depends on how my experiences play out. If I develop the ability to become a good enough musician to succeed, then I would definitely live in a big city.
He thinks his liberal politics may be more welcome there. If he does move, El Dorado will become a little more conservative, and his new city will get a little more liberal.
Cities are such a blend of different cultures and experiences. The only reason I wouldn't want to live in a city is because there wouldn't be a farm for me to go back to.
I'm talking with Jerry Pippin about a number of issues that are confronting us today. First, we'll talk about the divide between city, urban, and rural. An article over the weekend in the Weekend Journal of Wall Street Journal talks about this. The city is El Dorado Springs, Missouri. It's effectively between a place called Springfield, Missouri, and, of course, Kansas City, the home of jazz, etc., etc. But nonetheless, they talked to a minister there named Marsh, and he talked about the town and how people in rural communities help each other. And many times there's also family around for what he termed immediate needs. Now, he qualified it. He's not talking about if they have a major tornado or something of that nature that knocks down half the town, then obviously they wouldn't be able to help each other. And then there's the school principal that talks about his hobby farm. He has a few cattle there, enough to probably make a barbecue. I don't know if he had any chickens there or not. But anyway, he has a few things there. But he states very clearly in this little video that when people leave his high school, matriculate out, they leave the town because there's not any jobs there. And the few jobs that are agriculturally related are now corporate farms that are 2,000, 3,000, a little more of that on hectares, about 4,000 hectares. So thus they are out of that particular game. And then they also, in this interview, talked to the local Congress type there. Her name is Hassler. And she espouses the benefits of not being diverse. In other words, if people are like mine, like you'd have at a Klan meeting or a Tea Party meeting, things get along better. And its contrast between Kansas City, which is a much more multicultural society. They talked there with the congressperson there, the Right Reverend Emmanuel Cleaver. They didn't mention that he's also a minister. But nonetheless, he talks about the diversity there in, of course, Kansas City. So the two towns are there. This town is about 3,500 people, less than, this is El Dorado Springs, less than 4,000, had 30 churches in it, and one saloon. And one fellow they interviewed there, he has a local restaurant, small restaurant, and he wants to put in additional product called beer or alcohol. But he said his name would be, as they say, mud in the town, and people would get mad at him. So no alcohol there, and he's trying to increase his bottom line literally before he goes bankrupt. And another woman, she talks about a $400,000 grant she got from the feds. So they put in some sidewalks downtown, street lights, place looks nice. The only problem is they have a bunch of boarded up businesses to mess up the decor. And no replacement parts coming to that particular town in the near future. And she said, unfortunately, some business owners have died. And obviously, if they had any relatives, they weren't interested in going back in business in El Dorado Springs. Jerry Pippin, what do you think about this?
Well, what we've seen in this town you're talking about in Missouri, which is between Joplin and Springfield in southwest Missouri, which, by the way, is more conservative and more religious influence than some southern states. I know, I've worked there and lived up to there. The people are all God-fearing, going to church, and some of them are hypocrites, but not all. Many of them buy into the religion, hook, line, and sinker. And what we've witnessed is a sea change in the political arena because the Democrats used to be able to get those voters, but the Republicans masterfully used abortion and a few other issues to actually, get people to switch over to Republicans. So now little towns like this are very Republican, despite the fact that many of the policies are not growth-oriented and of the Republican Party, and basically they leave it up to the individuals to survive for themselves. And that appeals, of course, to the agricultural community in one way, but in another way, it's really encouraging a dependency that it's just not there anymore, because you can't really make it on your own anymore. Like the farmers up there, they're facing corporate farms, 2,000 to 3,000 acres apiece. And used to, those farmers had a couple hundred acres each, and they would grow the crops, cotton or whatever, and they take it to market and sell it. Well, that's all changed now. So not only are there no jobs in the town itself, but at the same time, there's no jobs on the farm, and there's no farmers. So what's going to happen? They all have to leave, and they go to Kansas City, probably, the closest, or maybe down to Tulsa in Oklahoma, as that's only about 120, 130 miles away as well. And they move to the city. And the interesting thing is that you mentioned at the rate of how many blacks versus Caucasians, and there's not many blacks in that little town. In fact, there's not many blacks in that whole area. And as a result of that, when you drive into Kansas City from there, you have to go through an urban section of Kansas City to get downtown. And I'm telling you, the Republican Party is instilled fear, and these people have bought into it, and they're literally afraid to drive even to Kansas City. I mean, it's just fear, in my opinion, is the overriding factor. And the second thing, I mean, and the reason I mention that is because it's not only the fear of the people in the urban population and fear of this and fear of that, but it's a fear of God. And their religion features God as vengeful, and if you don't obey him, you're going to go to hell. And, that's the reason, as you'll hear in this next segment, Jimmy Carter, just like I did, quit the Southern Baptist Church. It just, in the first place, it's like a war on women, and I'm always surprised any females still go there. I mean, they literally believe the woman should walk one step behind the man, the man's boss. And, of course, having a woman speak from the pulpit is unheard of.
Jimmy Carter, Jerry, talked about that. Not only, evidently, more steps backward, I suppose, than they had at one time. Not only women not in the pulpit, but evidently they couldn't be what's called the deacons, and they must be officials of the church or something.
That's right. They can't have any of those jobs.
At one time, didn't they not have women as deacons at one time? I don't know.
I don't think so. I think they've always been that way. They believe that they're fundamentalist, and they believe the Bible fundamentally. Now, not everybody in the Baptist Church, buys into all of that, but that's the official dogma of the church.
Right.
And,
it's interesting.
All my relatives are preachers, and I was the only radio person in the family, and almost an outcast. If you think it's bad enough to be selling beer in your store, wait till you find out to start hanging around those sinful entertainers.
I would imagine so. Now, it's interesting to note that the head of the Southern Baptist Convention, which is their large organization, is an African-American. I forget his name, Dr. somebody. But anyway, so in other words, they've changed a bit at the top, but they still have a lot of work to do. President Carter also talked about his relationship with President Obama. He doesn't have one. And the NSA, as far as them spying on him, he suspects they probably are. So when he wants to communicate with a head of state or somebody in some government or whatever, he just literally writes it out in longhand. Jimmy Carter's very good at that. Or type it out, drop it in an envelope, put it in a mailbox, and off she goes. And she'll get to Syria or China or wherever it is when it gets there. And that's the way Jimmy Carter communicates. And that's the end of that. One other thing, Jerry, about Jimmy Carter, when he ran, I remember that, he ran against our own Senator Kennedy. Senator Kennedy did not like him, thought he was too conservative. He ran as a middle-of-the-road Southern born-again Christian. Literally was a born-again Christian at that time. Most people now wouldn't think that Jimmy Carter was born anything. In fact, the evangelicals hate Jimmy Carter. And he's reading his Bible every day in English and Spanish.
And he actually still has the same religious beliefs he did 20 years ago. This movement for the Christian right has gone so far away from the Bible I know about, that it's scary. And they literally abortion is. It helped them switch, but there's other issues as well, and they just they're yearning for a Norman Rockwell time again, and it's not here.
It was worse than Norman Rockwell.
It's going to be.
They had wine at the kitchen table. I mean, it's to the point they went genuinely off of the clip with Jimmy Carter. And so Jimmy Carter is out, and any of those people that were around at the time, now Jimmy Carter is like seen as the chair of the Georgia Communist Party. Incidentally, his grandson, Jason Carter, in some of the polls is ahead of Dill, That's the right-wing Tea Party governor down in Georgia. So we'll see how that comes out. We have one more item, Jerry, which you and I talked about, and I guess you almost laughed about it. But anyway, it's now official. We'll get it up here in just a second here. Because Mr. Sabato himself says it's... I'm on the wrong deal. Let me get to the right workstation here.
You're talking about Larry Sabato.
I'm talking about Larry Sabato, the great author of the Kennedy book. We don't hear about that anymore, but he made his big splash. Anyway, this is his crystal ball, the rating of 2016 Republican presidential contenders. And into Tier 1, he has no other than John Jeb Bush. And the second in line there is that character out of Wisconsin, Scott Walker. And then Rand Paul. We'll talk a little about him. He still has Two-Ton Christie up here, governor of New Jersey. And in the second tier, we just do these while we're here. Marco Vegas Rubio out of Florida, and Ted Canadian Cruz, and John Kirsch. Now, John Kirsch is the governor of Ohio, but he's seen more as running for vice president. And then we got the wild cards. Little Paulie Ryan, Mike Huckabee. Mike Huckabee, incidentally, is leading in some polls. And then they have Rob Portman. That's another vice presidential type. Susan Martinez. She's the governor of New Mexico. That's more vice presidential type. And also Rands. And now some people disagree on Rick Santorum of Pittsburgh, but he could be in one of those tiers. And then there's Rick Perry and his Rock. So what do you think of Mr. Jeb Bush as being... let me just give you the key advantages. Gubernatorial resume, yeah. A Latino connection, yeah. They call Florida a swing state. Well, yeah, it hasn't been swinging as much lately. It's swung towards President Obama. The national Bush money, well, that's a given right there. Disadvantage, wrong last name. Let's see what else. G.W. Bush's record. And does he actually want to run? Well, they don't have anybody, so possibly could run. One of the other things they didn't put down here as far as his so-called resume, he stole the 2002 election. So what's your thoughts on Mr. Bush?
Well, I think he'll be damaged goods. I don't think he can do much. I think the nation's had enough of the Bushes, and I'm not sure why even the Republicans are embracing him, other than they have nobody else, no one that can possibly get the Spanish vote. And also, pick up some independent votes. And so that's why they're embracing Jeb Bush. But I think, he can make all the progress he wants to, do all the interviews, get all the people in the media bragging on him. But people have just had enough of the Bushes. And should he be held responsible for W's transgressions? Well, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, his dad, when we talked about the first Bush presidency and talking about W's dad, he didn't do very well either.
No,
so
but W's dad.
If they're putting all the eggs in the Bush basket, I think they're on a way to destruction. But I haven't heard them pick a winner yet.
Well, the old man Bush, the first president, George H.W. Bush, is now seen as a saint. He couldn't be elected anyway. He would have been too progressive. He was almost as to the left as Jimmy Carter. So they don't mention the old man very much anymore. In fact, he came out for quote-unquote what they call same-sex marriages and married a same-sex couple. He won't be mentioning his old man in his presidential campaign. And then, of course, Rand Paul. Rand Paul, incidentally, was at Berkeley. Had on his cowboy boots, dungarees, and I think he did have a tie on. And he's trying to get the student votes for his libertarian views. He's anti-NSA. He said about Ukraine, who cares? So he's in third place on this. I'm not sure why they threw Scott Walker into second place. That means they don't have nothing. Because he's bland like a box. And then, of course, the last one in the so-called first tier was Two-Ton Christie. Two-Ton Christie is just trying to stay out of jail at this point in time. And these other characters here, Rubio and Ted Cruz, they're just basically all trying to get the Tea Party vote, the Latino vote, and going nowhere. So basically what it is, it's at this point in time with the Republicans, as far as they see it, and some of the money people, Jeb Bush is it, and it. They don't even got a second or third choice. They can try to run. Walker's not running anywhere.
Well, it's a long time till the nominating convention.
Fortunately for them.
We'll have to see what comes around. And the off-year elections, we'll see how that does. Obama has distanced himself from Jimmy Carter, no doubt about it. But a lot of Democrats have, and I think they really made a terrible mistake there. Because Jimmy Carter actually he did things morally correct, and I'm talking about foreign policy, things like that. And the conservatives try to make that a weakness, and I'm not sure most people agree with that. And so could he get elected if he ran for something? No, not really. He's been discounted too much. But
what do you mean, Jimmy Carter?
Kind of like Obama's health plan. They've been running it down so long that the facts don't really matter anymore.
Well, the thing with Jimmy Carter, the thing with Obamacare, it's coming back up. Its anniversary is 4 years old now, believe it or not, and it's reached over 5 million people. So it's starting to reach the people, and it's just started to actually get the people in. So it'll be doing okay. But one thing to remember, Jimmy Carter had a health plan that never went anywhere. The last person that had a program that literally could have went through, and this is since Harry Truman started it all out, was Richard Nixon.
That's right.
Was literally Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon almost got two things through before he was impeached. One would have been a national health care program, and the other thing would have been a guaranteed income program. And now it wasn't as much as Dr. McGovern's, but if it had been written into law, it would have changed a lot of things over. It would have created a situation where you would have had far less homelessness. Everyone was qualified for the thing. All you had to do is be indigent, and you would have had, you'd have got your national guaranteed income. So those are some of the things. The thinking was different in the 60s, and even in 76 when Jimmy Carter came around. What changed everything was Reagan. And Reagan came in. Now, Reagan, although he went to Pittsburgh, Mississippi, got the races and everybody that votes, he was not turbulent, and even had Falwell and all those nuts in there. Reagan himself was not really a religious person. So it was a bit different with him. And even Reagan had, I suppose, whatever you want to call it, to say that a person out of work should be entitled to unemployment and get an unemployment extension, whereas the Republicans today would say no. And the preacher there, Marsh, in the little town of El Dorado Springs, people help each other and not rely on government for immediate needs. Well, yeah, that's like a food show. But if El Dorado Springs had a tornado, and in which it could happen in that area, they did have something over in Springfield, or in Joplin, excuse me. The federal government had to come in because the whole town was parts of the town was gone. I mean, and the church is with it. So in other words, they would have not been able to help themselves at that point in time. So there's a very weakness in that. And also, to recap on El Dorado Springs, the high school there, yes, it's graduating people. The superintendent has his little so-called hobby farm, not a real farm. He doesn't have to rely on it for income. He's just got something to do. But if he lost the job at the school, who knows what he'd be doing? I guess he'd be driving to Kansas City, Tulsa, or somewhere else, whatever, to get a job. Anyway, I'll let you sum this up, Jerry. People will be able to get this at jerrypippin.com, and you will hear, as we start out, the Wall Street Journal's little video on El Dorado Springs, Missouri, and we'll end up with Jimmy Carter, and we'll let you have the final words before we hear Jimmy Carter.
The basic thought I have about the political attitudes is when you can take a really good man who does have some faults. Jimmy Carter does have a temper. Jimmy Carter is kind of unforgiving in many ways, and that's one reason probably President Obama doesn't get along with him. But Jimmy Carter, by and large, did, what should be done. And he basically made all these policies built around the fact that the better of the human being and the betterment of society. And so how he raises the hackles of a lot of people who actually believe some of the things he believes in. It just shows you the power that the conservatives have amassed over the media and forming ideas and thought patterns of the public at large, especially in small towns in the Southwest, the Midwest, and the South. And they've been very successful. Now, you got to understand that the big puzzle that I have, and probably a lot of people do in politics, is less people are going to church these days. The religion seems to be playing more of a role in getting people elected. In other words, nothing to do with gays, nothing to do with the women who need an abortion, make them have the children, but these same people aren't willing to step forward and take care of the children and the mother. And so, they're talking about family values, and immediately their first policy is designed to abandon the family. And by forcing unwed mothers to go and have their children and then try to raise them. And, of course, they can't work and find a job and raise their kids at the same time. And they end up having to try that. And that could be a large part of the problems we have today that these conservatives are upset about. They're the ones that created this condition.
Very well put, Jerry. Very well put. We'll talk to you next week. Okay,
thanks very much. Little under the weather tonight, but we're still on schedule to get out of this medical facility by the end of April.
Well, that's very good news, Jerry, and they can find you at jerrypippin.com, right?
Okay, yeah, right.
Yeah, and there. And are you doing your program tomorrow night that you normally do?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
We're doing it live.
Tell us a little bit about
it. The first hour is live. Okay. Second hour is recorded because I'm battling severe pain at this point, and I'm not sure I can sit through 2 hours. But we have a great show the second hour. We deal with everything from werewolves to Bigfoot to flying saucers and UFOs in the state of Pennsylvania the second hour. And it's quite common up there. A lot of mysterious things have happened. I think you'll enjoy it. Stan Gordon will be our guest, and he'll be talking about it. They already mentioned Kecksburg, where this acorn-shaped spacecraft landed, and the Army showed up at 3 a.m. and loaded it on a flatbed. Nobody's seen it since, except Stan found a witness who saw it at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base later in a hangar. Yes, and so that'll be an interesting show, even though it is pre-recorded. But the first hour and 15 minutes will be live, and we'll be taking phone calls as well as talking to some people about the things that happen in Europe and England, flying saucer and UFO-wise. You'd be surprised. Lots of activity over there still yet.
Not surprised at all. Incidentally, Jerry, have you heard anything else about Area 51 and the woman that had the restaurant and what was it?
Yeah, she's still working the restaurant and everything, and she says that they've made it just fine without the gas station, and they even have some gas there in case somebody runs out of gas before they can get someplace else.
Yeah, that was a little, whatever they call the place, a little somebody restaurant.
Yeah, Little Alien Inn.
Little Alien Inn. And what about the fellow that bought up the town? Is anything else about him? hadn't checked in with that paper out there to see if...
No, he just quietly brought up to town.
And he's been quiet himself.
He's closing everything. He closed everything.
Okay.
But the people at the Lowell Inn say that the tourists still keep on coming.
Well, it'll be interesting, Jerry, on that. I just wonder if he has an office over there at Erie 51.
Yeah.
You never know. Anyway, nice talking to you, Jerry. I'll talk to you next week.
Okay, thank you.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
With former President Jimmy Carter.
That's right, David. I spoke with him at the Carter Center in Atlanta about his new book, A Call to Action, Women, Religion, Violence, and Power. We also talked about the crisis in Ukraine, as well as his distant relationship with President Obama. Why did you choose this time to focus on women and the way women are victimized around the world?
For the last 3 years, we've been concentrating on the relationship between religion on the one hand and the abuse of women and girls on the other. The existing abuse of females is the worst and most pervasive and unaddressed human rights violation on earth. That is really derived, I would say, indirectly from the fact that religious leaders say that women are inferior in the eyes of God, which is a false interpretation of the Holy Scriptures. But when they see that the Pope and the Southern Baptist Convention and others say that women can't serve as priests and so forth equally with men, they say, well, I'll treat my wife the way I want to because she's inferior to me.
You and Rosalind Carter actually left your own congregation, or part of the Southern Baptist congregation, because of the way your church was treating women.
The convention decided in its annual meeting to require that women be subservient to their husbands, and that women could no longer serve as a pastor or priest or even as a deacon. Those kind of things really convinced me that I should change.
Another institution you were very much part of was the military, the Naval Academy. And why do you think it is that the Pentagon is so resistant to changing and reforming the way sexual assaults are handled in the military?
Exactly the same thing happens in universities in America as happens in the military. Because presidents of universities and colleges and commanding officers don't want to admit that under their leadership, sexual abuse is taking place. So rapists prevail because they know that they're not going to be reported.
I want to ask you about foreign policy, given all of your expertise. It was actually on Meet the Press in 1980 that you said we would not go to the Olympics because of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan.
It's very important for the world to realize how serious a threat the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan is.
And now we have this situation with Ukraine. What advice would you give in dealing with Vladimir Putin?
I think there has to be a concerted international prohibition against Putin going any further than Crimea.
Does the president ask you for advice?
Unfortunately, the answer is no. President Obama doesn't, but previous presidents have called on me and the Carter Center to take action.
Why do you think you don't have that relationship with Barack Obama?
That's a hard question for me to answer, with complete candor. I think the problem was that that in dealing with the issue of peace between Israel and Egypt, the Carter Center has taken a very strong and public position of equal treatment between the Palestinians and Israelis. And I think this was a sensitive area in which the president didn't want to be involved. When he first came out with his speech in Cairo calling for the end of all settlements, and when he later said that the 67 borders would prevail, he and I were looking at it from the same perspective. But I can understand those sensitivities, and I don't have any criticism of it.
There's been a lot of criticism of his policy regarding drones and the NSA surveillance. And the NSA has argued that this kind of intelligence gathering is critical to try to protect the American homeland.
That has been extremely liberalized and I think abused by our own intelligence agencies. As a matter of fact, I have felt that my own communications were probably monitored. And when I want to communicate with a foreign leader privately, I type or write the letter myself, put it in the post office, and mail it.
Old-fashioned snail mail.
Yeah, because I believe if I send an email, it will be monitored.
I just wanted to ask finally, with all your energy, what keeps you going? What is the secret, the magic of Jimmy Carter?
Well, there's no magic involved. My wife and I have been lucky enough to be leaders of the Carter Center, promoting peace, enhancing democracy. It's unpredictable, it's adventurous, and I have to say it's gratifying and exciting for us still to do that.